Hello, welcome to my, do I call it what? Live broadcast. So today I want to discuss something. The EU gave Kenya around 520 billion shillings worth of it's a mixture of loans and grants, and they say that the agenda for that it's to support the big four agenda. That's the purpose of that loan facility. Now, when they say loan and grants, it's just to hoodwink you, because it means that the grants are just there to paint a pretty picture, but we'll be paying a lot of it, more than we'd be receiving it free. So anyway, I wanted to discuss the big four agenda. Number one, the big four. The first one is universal healthcare. The second one is manufacturing. The third one would be affordable housing, and the fourth one would be food security. So I wanted to discuss if these things are if we're going to put money into it, and if you're going to pay for it, then we need to analyze it to see if it's okay, right? So anyway, here comes the universal healthcare part. What Uhuru's government, Jubilee, is trying to do, they're trying to achieve 100% universal healthcare. And that sounds like a really, really good thing. But then I remembered one thing, right? Obama tried universal healthcare, and he tried it through, Obamacare. And I think most of you know by now that I had a problem with that. One specific problem that I had with Obamacare was what they call the individual mandate. That means that if you fail to get a healthcare coverage, then you'd have to pay a penalty for that. So it's kind of like what the government is saying is that they'll force you to take it up. So that comes where it's a matter of freedom. I think that's why Americans are so much opposed to it, because I should be free to do what I want, right? Especially when what I'm doing, it's not like a vaccine, such that if I don't receive it, then there's a critical mass of people who are in danger, because we need a minimum number of people need to have a vaccine for everybody to be safe. And in this case, it is my individual right to choose whether to have it or not to have it. If I'm receiving penalties for not having it, then that's a fundamental, you're trying to take away my freedom. So anyway, I read somewhere that NHIF, you pay a penalty of 250 baht per month if you pay late or if you do not pay. So we kind of like have that individual mandate in Kenya. Okay, so what do they want to do? The government, what it wants to do is that it wants to, let me just read it, to review the laws governing private insurance companies to encourage investment. So that's a very, very good thing. And a problem with the insurance companies is that they're really not held accountable. I know people who have gone through problems, right, health-wise, and when they approach the insurance company to pay for them, the insurance company did not pay. So that's it dampens the faith in that industry. Again, there's an insurance agent I know who complained that insurance agents are free. Like if they want to give you cover from Stanbic, if they want to give you a cover from Jubilee Insurance, they're usually free to do that if it's an agent, right? But what the government wants to do right now, it wants to force them to work under one specific company, and that's bad for you. You know why that's bad? Because if somebody is free to give you options from various companies, then you'll most likely choose the best option of those companies, and then he'll have educated you on a lot from those companies. But if one agent must work for one company, then it limits your choice. So that's a bit of a problem that we might face in future. So I wanted to talk about this NHIF kind of thing. The problem with universal healthcare, one, it's because it's compulsory. Number two, it's because eventually what they'll do is that they'll have to set up specific like NHIF, they have accredited hospitals, so they have to do that. And then the treatments would have to be limited, and then you still have to pay. I am not in support of that at all. Another problem that I have with especially when it develops further, is that there's a study in Canada right now that if you assisted suicide and euthanasia would save the Canadian government about $34.7 million to $138 million. That's every year. So eventually, after we see that these systems are not sustainable, that we cannot have that universal coverage because it's a utopian idea, then what happens is that we'll start cost-cutting measures, right? We'll start forcing people into certain directions. And remember, it's always by force. And what happens with that is that as soon as people start these studies, just small studies, saying assisted suicide is okay, euthanasia is okay, then at the end of the day, we might say, why are we spending so much money on these guys? We have young people who need healthcare, so let's just get rid of these people. They're old, so they'll be dying soon. So let's kill. And that's the problem with that, because it usually develops. And that's why you need to stop the state at certain junctures where it is not necessary to have a government. Do not have a government in that industry. So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to talk about, just to give you an idea of why I have that might be a reality. We might not see it today, but that might be a reality. Like when it came to Obamacare, what they did was that they would force companies to pay for abortion pills if their employer wanted to abort, let's say, a baby. And she went to the hospital and they charged her for the abortion pills. So you'd actually be paying for someone's abortion. Now, for me personally, I think most people would know by now that I'm against it. Most Catholics are against it. And what happened was that the Little Sisters of the Poor, I think they're the ones who went to court and who say that, no, they can't do that because their conscience goes against that. Again, when we put the government in areas where it should not be, especially when it comes to our health, then it becomes a problem in future. I know that Kenyans right now, we might not appreciate the arguments behind it, but eventually it will come to you. The penalties, they came. The treatments, I think we're still discussing about that. What kind of treatments can you seek? What kind of treatments can you not seek? I think we're discussing about which hospitals you cannot go to, which hospitals you can go to. Eventually, it will come to what I'm saying. We'll have to introduce cost-cutting measures, and those who are deemed unworthy of our society, they'll become unworthy. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about when it comes to universal healthcare. Again, the approach that Uhuru is using, it won't solve anything. What we need is to facilitate the private sector, help the industry grow by its own, on its own. Yeah, so I'll be touching about how private enterprise helps. Let me just go to the next one, which is manufacturing. Jubilee wants to create 1.3 million manufacturing jobs. That's by 2022. Sounds nice, right? And it's always nice when people create jobs. But here's the thing. How do you create those jobs? They introduced a VAT on fuel just the other day. They introduced taxes on M-Pesa transactions, on bank transactions. And these taxes, they will continue piling up. Again, the taxes are general, sort of like they affect the middle class, they affect the manufacturers and everybody. And what happens after that? You cannot create jobs when taxes are increasing. And that's why I usually like giving people an example of America. Let's see what's happening in America. Now, since Trump came into office, right? Job gains for the manufacturing industry in the US at their best level since 1995. The Obama administration, it increased taxes so it can do all of that stuff like the universal healthcare, so it can pay for all those things. And when you increase taxes, he lost jobs. Obama's economy, they lost manufacturing jobs. And the loss was so bad that Obama used to say that these jobs can't come back. They're coming back. 327,000 jobs, I think they have come back. Right? Manufacturing jobs, just manufacturing. And how do they come back? Reduce taxes, reduce the regulations. So we cannot say that we are pursuing a big four agenda and taxes are increasing. It does not work that way. It's economics. And numbers don't lie. Right? Okay, so I wanted to add, the government will ensure that a specific industry, the leather industry, because we import, I think, 30 million shoes, and we have the third largest third largest herds of cattle in Africa. So it's a bit funny. We're importing 30 million shoes. We like have the third largest number of cattle in Africa. Why don't we produce leather from them? So why don't we? So the government is trying. What it wants to do is that it wants to establish 5,000 cottage industries. There's a Machakos leather park they want to establish, and 3 more leather parks. So again, government intervention. That's what we are seeing. Universal healthcare, there's government intervention. When it comes to like manufacturing, there's government intervention. So at the end of the day, what we'll see, what I'd want you guys to see is that the impact of this government intervention. Does it really work? And if you're pumping money into government intervention from the EU, then will that money, will it pay off, right? And eventually, I think the EU members are a bit bright, because they know that eventually we'll just end up in debt. So we'll ask for more debt to pay up this debt. Anyway, I wanted to say, like what Trump was saying, what Trump did was that he reduced taxes and he reduced regulations. He put up protective barriers for the steel industry, and he did nothing else. He didn't start saying that the government will establish this, the government will establish that. No, he didn't start saying that. As soon as people saw that taxes were being reduced, they were kind of like, hey, Apple wants to move back to America. You get? He didn't establish an Apple plant. Apple itself wanted to move back to America. When you go to like the steel industry, as soon as he put up the barriers, the steel manufacturers was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to set up steel plants. I'm going to revive them, right? And that's what happens in an economy. The government does not need to be there. All it needs to do is to create the conditions for growth. Think of it like a parent. A parent does not need to do homework for the child. All the parent needs to do is to provide an environment for the child to learn, and then just to grow and to pursue their kind of like talents. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about it. Another thing that we needed to know is that when it comes to manufacturing, we really can't play with energy. We can't play with energy, right? I think 87% of our energy, electricity comes from, let's say, renewable sources. That would be geothermal and hydroelectric, and then the rest, the ones that are supposed to serve as backup, that would be like a, let's say the fuel. What do I call it? Okay, we use fuel like oil to generate that electricity. So what happens from my observations is that we have underutilized the hydroelectric power and the geothermal power so that people can profit off the fossil fuels, the power that we generate from fossil fuels. And if we are really serious about manufacturing, we won't play around with energy, because that's the number one. And that's why energy is, the US takes it as a matter of national security. It's not just anything, it's a matter of national security. And that's what we need to start thinking. That's the way they think you need to develop it, such that these cartels that are playing around with energy, we need to deal with them as though they're declaring war on Kenya. Not kill them, but seriously deal with them. Okay, another thing. The oil crisis, there was some oil crisis some time back, I think in the 1970s, really depressed the world economy. Like Thailand grew by 12%, I think it was from 1986 to 1995, just for around 12 years. I can't remember the years exactly, but it grew a lot. And one of the reasons it grew is because the prices of oil went down. Now, look at Kenya. We've discovered oil in Turkana. No substantial drop in oil prices. We closed a refinery in Mombasa. And what does that do? The more you import finished goods, the more you pay. So I'm really thinking about these things. That refinery was supposed to be opened in May. Has it been opened? What do you expect if you're not opening it? So as in, people like to listen to a lot of rosy stuff, like the government is, and it gives you figures. We're going to create, how many jobs are this? We're going to create 1.3 million manufacturing jobs. That would be 726 by 2022, again by the election time, and that would be kind of like 726 jobs per day. As in, we love those figures, and when they give us that utopian, everybody can receive healthcare, we kind of like, we like that, and it's only human. But at the end of the day, it never works, and we need to think more, right? Now, when it comes to affordable housing, I want to touch on this. The government wants to build 500,000 affordable houses. Another statistic that I noticed, and I don't know where I'm living. The average rent for 1 to 3 bedroom residential property in Kenya is 66,000 bob per month. That's according to some property website. I don't pay 66,000 and nowhere close, right? So the ones who pay that, big up. Anyway, so okay, from there, housing in Kenya it's a bit of a problem. We have 50,000 housing units that we are building every year. We need 250,000 housing units, and it will increase as the population increases, right? So how do you solve that? The government is trying to solve that because Uhuru, what he did is that he launched a project, I think just the other day. They're trying to build 30,000 houses, low-cost houses in Nairobi, and they're trying to build, which is this other one. They're just trying to build a lot of houses in Nairobi. And here's what I noticed, right? Because I went and did the research. One of the research fellows in Kenya, I think it was a master's student, these are the challenges that are facing the housing industry. One is the high cost of land. Another one is inadequate housing infrastructure, high cost of labor, poor legislation, and poor institutional frameworks, and lack of credibility of official documents. At no point does he mention the need for government intervention, the lack of intervention from the government. At no point does he mention that. And if you look at all of these things, they can be solved without involving the government. Like if let's say the cost of land is high. Why is it high? Because the documents are not credible. So the people who have credible documents, they hike up their prices. It's the law of demand and supply. If there's let's say, like, which is the other one, there's poor legislation and institutional frameworks. Create good legislation and institutional frameworks. You don't need to start building houses. It's not the problem. Another one, again, I think it's a Nairobi University master student. Here are the problems that we face, right? Low return on investment. People are putting their money into housing, they're not receiving enough return. Rising cost of land. Again, rising cost of land. Scarcity of land with infrastructure, right? That means that we are concentrating within the urban areas. So when you build outside the urban areas, people are not coming there. So how does the government solve that? It solves that by bringing resources to those areas. You get? Build infrastructure there, because scarcity of land with infrastructure is the problem. So build infrastructure over there, and people will come and build houses over there. You don't need to build houses, right? There's high interest on capital finance, and then there's complex land acquisition processes, and that the government can deal with that, because it's the government, it's the one that's causing this land acquisition problems. And then there's outdated planning regulations. The government can deal with that. It can deal with that. So anyway, I'll touch on capital in just a bit. So we are solving problems that don't exist. The government intervention by the government is unnecessary unless it is providing proper institutional frameworks, it is providing like proper guidelines on how to buy houses and all of those things, and that will reduce the cost of land, right? When you reduce the cost of land, you don't need a lot of capital, right? So now the capital that you have, you can use it to buy land. These things, when you start solving the problem, then the other things fall into place. But when you borrow money to put in things that will not solve the problem, then eventually you just end up paying for more, right? And that's our children who will be paying for that by the way. Okay, so here are other solutions that I sought by scholars, and I don't know why the government is not using scholars. Low cost materials, so that's one of the things. Another way is that I found this interesting: tenant purchase agreements, right? Such that when you move into a building, the rent you pay, it goes into like it's like a mortgage. The more you pay, then the more you buy that house. The rent is actually like payment for that house over a long time. I think that's a very good agreement. Of course, I think it would be at a higher premium. If people are paying 10, then it would be paying 12. But that's okay, because at the end of a number of years, then things would have been sorted, and you'd have a house, and then the landowner would receive more over those number of years, right? So you'd actually solve the problem of low cost in terms of return. So these problems, we don't need government intervention. Okay, so like the supply rigidities, remove that. That's one of the problems. And how do you remove that? Make sure that the processes are clear. And then mortgages, people, okay, taking up mortgages is good. People will take up more mortgages naturally as their income increases, right? You don't really have to push people to do that, because one of the reasons they're not doing that is because they don't have enough disposable income. Another reason would be like they don't have enough information, but mostly it's because they don't have enough disposable income. Around 30 to 40% live below poverty. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do. And as you, I hope that I'm passing the message through that government intervention does not work. So this is the last one. I hope I'm done. Okay, food insecurity, right? When it comes to food insecurity, I wanted to give a story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Like when when Caesar died, he left his estate to Octavian. And that effectively meant that Octavian would become the emperor, not Julius Caesar's longtime friend, who was Mark Antony. So they fought. There were a bit of battles that happened, and eventually Mark Antony decided to go to Egypt to rule the eastern side of the empire, whereas Octavian would stay in the western side of the empire. And what Mark Antony did, he decided to cut the grain supply to Rome, to the Western Empire, and that brought war. And that's the importance of food security, because when you don't have food, then you have no choice but to fight, and it can lead to the fall of an empire. And this time, Octavian, he had to fight Mark Antony. Mark Antony was a very brilliant general, right? But Octavian, I think because of Agrippa, he had Agrippa behind him, but Octavian had to go, and he had to go to war, and he won, right? So we shouldn't be playing around with food security. We should, like the scandals that are going around with maize, the scandals that are going around with let's say even the sugar, we shouldn't be playing around with that. So I wanted to add two things. There is self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Self-sufficiency is when you can actually produce within the country, right? Like the US produces more maize than necessary, so it doesn't need to import maize from others. So if you can do that, then that would be nice. Don't you think so? Another thing is like self-reliance. That's why you can amass the resources. Like you can buy from many areas, and you have them within your area in case there's a problem. And that's what Rome usually did. It usually bought from Egypt. It could buy from Egypt, but periodically the Egyptians brought problems, so it had to come to war. Self-reliance self-sufficiency is the best way. When it comes to critical food supplies, like maize is our staple food, we shouldn't be importing that. Okay, so that's why we need a strategic grain reserve. I understand that. What is the government doing about like maize? They want to plant to produce 2.7 million bags of maize, potatoes, all of that stuff. Here's the thing, again, government intervention, and I'll keep warning people. The government spent 7.3 billion on the Galana Kulalu project, right? And they harvested 35.2 million bags of maize. 7.3 billion, they harvested 35.2 million. That's 22,000 bags of maize. And that's the problem when government gets into this stuff. It should stay out of it, right? So me, personally, what I believe is that the Big Four agenda, it's all a lie. We'll pay for that cash, and we'll pay dearly. And the Europeans know what they're doing, because I believe they've seen that this thing is going nowhere, right? Because it's based on government intervention, not based on the people, the growth of the people supporting these industries. It's based on the government, so the people are still outside of the game. So that's what I had for today. I hope I didn't take too long. So you guys take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.